Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. My name is Sifu Dave Charlesworth from Kajukenbo Napoli, and I've got a pretty exciting show for you tonight. Me and my co-host for tonight's episodes, Sifu Steve Miller. I've got a pretty special guest to share some information with you guys tonight, and I guess let's just get into it. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and play a little clip here in honor of our guest. And after that, we'll go ahead and introduce him to you, and we'll get going with the Joe Emperado experience.
Welcome. Today we are going to be clearing up some historical inaccuracies regarding Kajukenbo, Kenpo, and specifically the late, great, I believe, great Grandmaster Joseph Directo Emperado. And our very special guest, it is our honor and privilege to bring Professor David Tavares on board for this episode. He is the author of Black Robe, the Kajukenbo Kenpo Connection, and we are very excited to bring him on today and discuss this in detail and clear the air once and for all. Professor, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. The reason why that we're doing this podcast is there's some things about Joe Emperado. A lot of people get mad if I just call him by his given name, but I'm going to do that throughout. I still have the love and respect for Joe as a great martial artist. But anyways, I'm not sure exactly when all these inaccuracies, the false narrative that went on that really blackballed that my instructor and just the death of the murder of Joe alone. I'm going to go into details of what is stated in the book, just to clear this up, and this will be my last interview or podcast or discussion about it. This is just going to be a one-time thing. If anybody ever has any more questions about it, they can either get into the book or they can use this podcast as their records for Joe's death. But anyways, to get it started, I want to start off that at any time that you gentlemen have a question or a comment, you stop me. I'll write down, so I don't lose my train of thought. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and go through with back in 1987. Joe Adriano Emperado, he did a videotape with Panther Productions. It was called Kajukenbo History, Philosophy, and Concepts, or something like that. But anyway, about a 3-minute point, he just the subject of Joe's death, it came up, and he discussed it and I think this is where the narrative went wrong, and they blamed my instructor for the murder of Joe. But it went something like this. If you don't have to take my word for it, you can go and take a look at that video yourself, right about at the 3-minute mark, 4-minute mark. But basically, he said that he always told his students after training, go straight home, just go home, don't go out, go drinking or do anything like that. But he says that night Joe went out to the Pink Elephant on 367 North Britannia Street. His girlfriend Rose Sabat worked over there, and Joe, it was stated that he was a part-time bouncer over there. So he went over there to go meet his girlfriend and stay with her. And he said that Walter Gooding ended up going over there, having a few drinks. 3 men entered the bar, and when they went in, one of the guys, one of the 3 gentlemen, I wouldn't call them gentlemen, but one of the 3 men looked at Godin, and he kept looking at him. Godin went over there and said, "What you looking at?" I got in his face and everything. So they kind of, got into an argument. Joe went over there, saw what was the matter, calmed things down. He bought him a beer and went back, and there was nothing after that. But later on, Godin was leaving the establishment, and the 3 men followed him out. And when they were outside, they got into a shoving match. And one of the waitresses told Joe went outside there, pushed the guys out when he already stated that they were out, but I guess he pushed them out again, and turned around to go push Godin back inside the bar. When he did that, one of the men, the attackers, stabbed him in the back. Joe turned around, punched the guy in the face. The guy flew. The other guy stabbed him in the heart a couple times, and he said that instead of Godin staying to help Joe, he just took off running. Okay. Now, I'm going to break down that narrative, okay, was stated by Lieutenant Gunderson in his investigation. Okay, he went to the Pink Elephant. It was a 2-story wooden building, and it was on 367 North Baratan Street. The upstairs of the wooden building, there were apartments up there, and I believe it was those people up there that called the cops, because Godin said he remembers somebody calling the cops, yelling out cops. But downstairs there was Miyashiro's Tailor, then there was a barber shop, then there was Rosario's Cafe, and next to the Rosario's Cafe was the Pink Elephant. Lieutenant Gunderson stated that it was 9 foot in width, and there was outside by the curbside, it was 9 inches high, the curbside. And there was a stairs, it was a 4 foot high stairs that led up to the Pink Elephant. Okay, so now we'll go back to what C.J. Adriano said, that the guy stabbed Joe in the back, and he punched the guy flew. Okay, so he flew down the stairs maybe, or whatever, or just flew. And the second guy, stabbed him in the heart, and Godin took off running. Now, if that's what happened, Professor Godin would have had to run down those stairs, okay, past those guys. One of those guys, both of them, he would have either got shanked or stabbed on his way down and fell down the stairs or whatever. Okay, that is one scenario. The second scenario is that he went inside the establishment and ran out the back. Now, inside the police reports, it doesn't state that there was a back door, and it doesn't state that there wasn't a back door, was or wasn't. And the third scenario would be that he turned around, ran back inside the bar, stayed in the bar, or ran around in circles or whatever he did, and waited till the cops came or whatever. Okay, those are the three scenarios. I'm going to read from my book on the witness statements, the suspect statements, what had happened with the narrative, the experience that they gave. I'm not going to say story, because stories are embellished or made up or fantasy. This is an experience that happened. It was a life-changing experience for my instructor, and a life-ending experience for Joe, life-ending experience for Joe. But let me get back to that report. The bottom half of the report says, Detective Gunderson, I have to check my notes on this one. Sorry, I want to make sure it is accurate. Detective Gunderson checked the area for signs of evidence. There were few small spots of red colored substance on the cement sidewalk. None of the red substance could be obtained and kept as evidence due to the fact, that it had rained a little, and due to the fact that numerous people walked on the spots. It was nearly obliterated, due to the above reasons. The detective also searched for the missing T-shirt worn by Shimabuku that was torn off during the struggle, but it could not be found. Okay, now if I may read, starting from the suspects of who they were, and then I'll go into the victim and into the witnesses.
The first suspect is Thomas Masato.
Valili, he was age 23. He was unemployed at that time. He had no prior arrest. He was arrested on May the 30th, 1958 at approximately 7 o'clock. The arresting officer was an officer named, his first initial was H, last name was Burns. His badge number was 277, and he was charged with assault and battery with a weapon, misdemeanor 1. Now, the second suspect was William Sagwalili. He was age 21. He worked, he was a laborer at a place called Nordic, Meyer, and McGee. And he had no prior records also, but as a juvenile, he did. It's not clear who the arresting officer was or what time he got arrested, but William Sagwalili is the first person that they were looking for. So you're gonna find out the reason why they knew of him and how they were able to look for him first. Okay. Now the third suspect was George Shimabuku, age 22. He was a Mason. It didn't state where he was employed at, but he was arrested May the 30th, 1958 at approximately 7:30 p.m. The arresting officer was Officer Francis Sakai, badge number 277, and he was arrested for murder felony 1. Okay, the victim was Joe Emperado, age 28, date of birth June 29th, 1929. And his place of work was a Hawaii Pineapple Company. He was a mechanic helper over there, and it doesn't state in the police reports, but he was a bouncer at the Pink Elephant also. The next witness was Walter Godine, my professor. He was 21 years old at that time. He was employed at Hawaii Reinforcement and Hawaii Steel and Reinforcement. He was a laborer over there, and he was with Joe with the physical altercation. The third was Rose Sabat. Rose Sabat was 31 years old. She was a waitress at the Pink Elephant. She was employed there for about 5 months. She was a common law wife with Joe for about 1.5 years. And I didn't know that they had recognized common law marriages back at the time. Joe was married, but she was also a common law wife, and that's all I'm going to say about that. The next was Charlie Takara. Charlie Takara was 35 years old. He was the owner of the Pink Elephant Bar. Then there was Felipe Garcia, who's age 45. He was a handyman over there. Rosalie Tapek was 42 years old. She was the owner of Rosario's Cafe. There was Bernice Tong. She was unemployed. She also, she frequented the bar from what I understand. And there was Elizabeth Tabog, who's age 21. She was a waitress at the Pink Elephant, and she was the one that helped police be able to identify William Sagolili, because her and William Sagolili went to school. And you're going to read in the witness statements of about that. But those are the suspects. Those are the witnesses. And right now I'm going to read the statements from the suspects. I'm just going to read William Sagolili because Thomas Miora's statement is just almost basically the same, and it's going to be redundant. The only things that were, said a little different, the only things that were different of it was the physical altercation that they had with Walter Godine when they were engaged in combat. But I'm going to input that when the fight occurred, on what happened, what Thomas Miura did when he fought with Godine. Also, the statement that what Shimabuku had stated when they were inside the car taking off, driving away from the scene. Shimabuku said one thing according to Sagolili, and then in Thomas Miura's statement, it was said basically the same, but with the same intent. So this one I have to read from the book to make sure that I read exactly. If you will please indulge me, and anytime once again I say you have a question, please stop me. Okay, so now I have to note that during the interrogation, Miura, Shimabuku, and Sagolili refer to Godine as the Portuguese guy. They saw him, which is Portuguese. A Hawaiian dialect for Portuguese is Portuguese, and the Hawaiian dialect for Chinese is Pake, which they called Joe. I guess they thought that Joe was a Chinese. But anyways, this is the interrogation. The interrogation was run by Detective Leonard Gunderson and Detective Abraham Iona. The police report was James Sakai. It was written in shorthand. And it's William Sagolili, interrogation room number 5, 8:55 p.m., May 30th, 1958. Sagolili states that we went into the bar at about 1:15 a.m. We had gone to another bar, which was unknown, in Chinatown before the Pink Elephant, and had some drinks there. We drove to the Pink Elephant with Shimabuku's 1951 or 52 Chevy 4-door white colored sedan. We parked the car on Hall Street. Remember Hall Street, that name. We sat down and had Lucky Lager beers. Elizabeth, the waitress, came by and sat with us and talked to us. Sagolili and Elizabeth were classmates. The Portuguese guy and Shimabuku kept staring at each other. The Portuguese comes to the table and tells Shimabuku, what you looking at? Shimabuku says back, what are you looking at me for? Godin tells them, we go outside, take me in your car, take me anywhere, and I fight all three of you there. Shimabuku didn't say anything. It was getting close to closing time, and the workers were putting up the chairs. I asked Elizabeth if we could finish our beers. She said, okay. We we downed our beers. George remarked that if they throw us out, he's going to lick everyone in the bar. At about 2 a.m., Shimabuku yelled out, I wipe out anybody here. The Portuguese then came up to Shimabuku and asked Shimabuku if he wanted to fight now. Shimabuku said he didn't want to fight. The Chinese guy, Emperado, came over and asked us what was the matter and made them shake hands. On our way out, Godin and Shimabuku eyed each other up, and Godin said, one of these days you're going to get lickings the way you act. Shimabuku says, I don't care. They go outside. They start to argue. Godin punches Shimabuku in the mouth. Shimabuku flew against the car that was parked in the front. All of a sudden, the guy that died came from the bar doorway and charged George, and George flew against the back bumper of the car. Then Godin punched me in the face when I tried to break up the scuffle. I guess Godin thought that he came in to help Shimabuku. Joe and Shimabuku, so I went after Godin. Godin got me in a headlock. I'm not sure if it was a front headlock or a side headlock. That's my assessment. It doesn't stay inside there because it follows up to what happened. It says, then I heard someone say someone got cut. I yelled to Miura to get Godin off me. Miura went after Godin. Godin released me and then kicked me in the face. Okay. Sagolili points to the officer to the upper lip where he got kicked. So I don't know if he just had a front headlock and then right, that's when he called Miura to get Godin off of him. Miura states that he hit Godin twice. I'm not sure if one he had Shimabuku in the headlock, released him, kicked Sagolili in the face, and then Miura stated that Godin punched Miura in the face 3 times and then gave him a kick to the leg. Okay, and it says then the Portuguese challenges all 3 of us. We all charge after him and ran across the street, but we changed our minds and ran to Shimabuku's car. When we got in the car, I noticed George didn't have his shirt on. It must have gotten torn off during the fight. Then George told us that he stabbed the Pake guy. Shimabuku then showed us the knife, and it had blood on the blade. I tell him he should have not poked him because if he dies, they're going to come after me first. After all, I went to school with Elizabeth, the waitress who sat with us. Shimabuku says, I don't give a shit if that bastard dies or not. Now, Miura said that Shimabuku had stated, I don't care if he dies. So, it's about the same thing as just different language or whatever. Shimabuku also told us that when we were walking out of the Pink Elephant, he already had his left hand in his left pocket and that he was holding the knife blade open and that he was going to cut the first guy who punched him, which was Godin. He was the first guy that punched him. Shimabuku is the type of guy that brags. All of us call him Punchy, and he thinks he can lick anybody. In the car, he told us that he will kill anybody who fools with him. We went to my house in Lanakila housing to get Shimabuku a shirt. Then we went to Kapiolani Drive-In to eat breakfast. Then went to Kaukau Corner for coffee. Then went to the house of William Haino. We got there around 5 a.m. and slept until 7. Went to William Brothers' house in Waipahu at 9:30 a.m. Went back to town at 5:30 p.m. At 7 p.m. when I got home, my dad and sister told me that Emperado died. Later I called Mayor and told him. Now, Professor Godin, in his statement, he was telling me that when he was inside there, he had a beer, and every once in a while he looked. You know how you scope around the bar, and he says immediately Shimabuku locked eyes with him and just kept looking at him, and he kept bouncing his head like a boxer. He kept bouncing like a boxer, and he kept making poking gestures to him. And that's when Godin went over there and told him, in some colorful Kenpo language, it wasn't written inside there, what the fuck you looking at, And Shimabuku went that way, and Joe came over, made them shake hands. Godin told me, he said, no, fuck that. I ain't shaking his hand. And Joe forced me, you shake his hand, and then Godin, out of respect for his instructor, said he shook his hand after. And then it was like, okay, It's all cool. We're all local guys. Don't worry about it. And then that's when Shimobuku made that statement that he lick anybody in the bar or wipe out anybody. I think that's what Mayor said, that Shimobuku said that he lick anybody in the bar. Excuse me. And that's when Professor Godin came. Now, Professor Godin, in his statement when he was fighting, excuse me, if I can get to it, please. Okay. Anyways, it says here. Okay, it says when they were outside, Godin said, so he started to brawl, and Joe comes out and stops the fight. He grabs that guy and went between two cars. They probably fell because I couldn't see them. Then the Filipino guy went to go help George, so I struck him. When I struck him, he was jumping around, calling me a punk. Then the two came after me, so I stand in my Kenpo karate position, and one of the guys says, forget it, don't go near the guy. But I guess he was really angry, and he came charging at me. I got him in a headlock, and when I had him in a headlock, his other friend came after me, and I kicked him in the leg. I finally released the headlock on the guy and went over to help Joe. I intended to go back with him to fight off these guys. Then Joe said, these punks stabbed me. So the next thing on my mind was to get these guys away from Joe. Joe charges the guy that went stab him, but I saw he had no power to do what he was trying to do. So I swore at them, told them to come and get me. I sucked them over to me, get their attention on me, not Joe. So I challenged all three of them. So they came after me. They chased me. I started to pick up speed. Then I spun around, turned around by the bakery, and they were gone. I came back to the scene, and everything was quiet down already. I didn't know where the three guys went. Finding the place was empty, I went to Joe's house. I found him on the bed lying there. And his exact words to me were, don't worry, Godin, we get these guys. Now, that's Professor Godin on what he had told Lieutenant Gunderson. Now I want to read the statements of the witnesses, if I may. Okay, Rose Sabat was interviewed at 2:55 p.m. May the 30th, 1958. And two were actually conducted. The first one was conducted at St. Francis Hospital. It was a different police officer at that time because it wasn't a homicide yet. Joe was still alive. Okay, when it became a felony, then Lieutenant Gunderson took over by then. Okay. At about 10:30 p.m., 5:29:58, Joe and Walter came into the bar and sat at a table near the bar. She was tending the bar at the time. She states that Godin and Joe were both sober at the time. Just before midnight, she saw them change tables and sit with the owner of the bar, Charlie Takara, just before closing time. She saw Godin walk to the table where Elizabeth and the three males were sitting, and heard Godin say, what you looking at me for? She heard Godin and Shimobuku arguing, then saw Joe go over to the table and break it up and made them shake hands. Godin went back to his table. At closing time, Joe walked to the bar to talk to Charlie. She did not see Joe leave. She was busy cleaning up at the time. She heard Elizabeth yelling from the doorway, Uncle Joe fighting. She ran to the sidewalk and saw Joe and Shimobuku fighting. She pulled Joe away. Then Joe asked her how he got blood on his arm. She also noticed he was bleeding from his right arm. She then took him to Rosario's Cafe next door to the Pink Elephant Bar where he washed up, while Walter Godin was fighting the other three males and then ran. She added that she wasn't sure if they caught up to him or not. At about this time, a motorcycle officer, I didn't put in the book, but it was a guy named Officer Kamai. He arrived and told them that Joe had been cut with a knife. Joe told the officer he did not want to do anything, and the officer left the scene shortly thereafter. Joe took Rose in the car and drove him home. That dispels the myth about he walked home, and that he, in the news clipping, said he taxied home. When they got home, Joe lay down on the bed and complained of having difficulty breathing. She checked his body and found he'd been stabbed in his back, and it says, and his chest. But we found out later through the coroner's report, it was slice marks on his torso. The only stab mark was in the back. She then called the ambulance, although he did not want her to do so. He was taken to St. Francis Hospital for further treatment. Okay. Elizabeth Tabog, okay, she knows William Sagolili, and I pretty much know her story. Her shift was finished at midnight. She went outside into her car, stayed there till 12:30, went back into the bar. She saw Sagolili. She sat with them at the table, and that's when Godin came over, said, "What you looking at me?" And then back and forth. Joe made them shake hands, and it says, she later, okay, Joe came over and made them shake hands. She saw Joe later strike Shimabuku. Both of them fell against a parked car. While the two were fighting, Rose came out and pulled Joe away to stop fighting. She also said she saw Godin fighting with Sagolili and Mayora. Also stated that, excuse me, also stated that the three men came into the bar prior on Sunday, May the 25th, 1958, with three other males with them. Also stated she did not see anyone with a weapon. Okay, Rosalita Peck, at 2 a.m., 2:10 a.m., excuse me, she was closing up her business when she heard some commotion going on outside her cafe on the sidewalk where she saw Joe and Walter fighting. She saw Joe a short distance away from Godin fighting a Japanese boy and pushing away Rose Sabat, who was trying to stop the fight. She heard Joe say, "Who poked me with a knife?" Then Rose brought Joe into her business to wash up, where Rosalie noticed he was cut on his back and bleeding. She also noticed he was bleeding from a wound on his right arm and stomach area. Then she said later Rose and Joe got into the car and drove off. She stated at no time did she see anyone with the knife, and also added that she would not be able to identify the men involved with the fight if she ever saw them again. Bernice Tong stated that she saw Godin and the boy with the bangs in his hair like a girl. In his photo, it showed him that he combed his hair like the Dutch boy, paint boy. You know, it's just fucking weird. In fact, Godin called him that into an argument. And then Joe broke it up and made them shake hands. She didn't see anyone leave at closing time because she went to the ladies' room, but she heard commotion outside and saw Walter and another boy squaring off, fist fighting. Not wanting to be involved, she walked away, went to Rainbow Fountain to get something to eat. She did not witness the fight with Joe and Shimabuku, and she did not see anyone with a knife. Felipe Flores told the detective he didn't see anything. He was busy in the back filling the icebox with beer. He heard commotion. When he went out to look, he saw Joe standing on the sidewalk bleeding from some kind of wound on his right arm. He figured the fight was all over and he went back inside to fill up the icebox. Charlie Takara stated that at about 12:30, three young men came into his place of business, sat down at the table near the jukebox at Min's toilet. Him, Bernice Tong, Walter Godin, and Joe Emperado were sitting about 3 tables away from the 3 young men. Joe was in a good frame of mind and was massaging Charlie Takara's neck and talking and laughing. 3 young men were drinking Lucky Lager beers and were sitting with an off-duty waitress, Elizabeth Tabog. At about 1:45, he left his table and went to the men's room. While in the men's room, he heard a commotion going on outside. He came out to check. He thought Elizabeth and Bernice were the cause of the commotion, so he scolded Bernice. She had told him it was not her fault. He then went to the sidewalk and saw Joe and the boy with hair combed with bangs down his forehead. Both men were on the ground on the sidewalk. They both got up and noticed Joe was bleeding from the wound on his right arm. At this time, Rose was holding Joe's arm. Joe was taken to Rosaria's Cafe with Rose. Shortly thereafter, he saw Joe leaving, driving off in his car. Joe was the driver. He further stated the commotion started when he was in the men's room, so he didn't see the fight started. He did not see anyone with a knife or witness the stabbing. Okay. Now I'm going to read Shimabuku's statement to Lieutenant Gunderson on May the 30th, 1958 at 8:10 p.m. Shimabuku claimed Joe hit him in the mouth, so there it shows that he did strike him. Knocking him down on the sidewalk, he got up, pulled the knife out of his pocket, which he held in his left hand, and started to poke Joe with the knife. He also stated that he could use either hand very well, which showed me that he practiced. Okay, he could not recall how many times he stabbed Joe or where he had poked him, but he saw blood coming out of Joe's arm. Joe did not fall, but Joe did not attack him anymore either. So it shows that, well, Professor Godin said that it showed that he couldn't do what he wanted to do. I guess he was losing a lot of blood. Since he didn't attack anymore, he put the knife back, stuck it in the same pocket trouser. Okay, now there's a follow-up information that I want to put. When they were looking for William Salvalidi, the police officer arrived at the house about like 4:15 because he was the only known suspect at that time. It says his sister was home but did not want to give her name, but gave information on her brother. Salvalidi's sister related she got a call from William Hane's wife about the fight. All three got into the previous night. Sagolili's sister informed Officer Raymond Kawano, Beat 21, third watch, that she was most likely suspected George Shimabuku because he has an uncontrollable temper. All right. So those are the statements that were given. It's a lot different than what Sergio Adriano stated in the 1987 interview. You know, I'm just putting out the fact that's it's different than that. And a lot of people, you know, had their own ideas about Professor Godin over all the years, you know, and they blamed him and they said he was the start of it. You got to remember, okay, you know, there's an old saying. In fact, they used to put it on Kajukenbo Cafe a lot, you know, that the only way that evil is to prevail in this world is for good men to do nothing. Now, you know, Joe and Professor Godin, they're martial artists. They're going to stand up for what they believe is right, you know. Shimabuku, he came inside there with a knife. You know, you carry a knife for self-defense, that's one thing. But you come inside there looking for trouble, you know, that's a predator. Now, Godin is with his instructor, you know, who's a bouncer at the establishment. And, you know, the guy is, you know, looking like, you know, belligerent, you know. So, you know, they don't want that inside there. So he's going to protect his establishment. Joe's going to protect his establishment. He's going to protect, you know, the owner and the waitress. So, you know, unfortunately, it ended up in a fight, you know, and so I'm just thinking if they weren't there and they would have got into it with somebody anyways, you know, maybe one of the waitresses would have got hurt, Charlie Zakaro would have got hurt, you know, somebody else would have got hurt, but it was martial artists there that were, you know, there to you know, protect themselves and protect the establishment. And you know, it went to court, and unfortunately, you know, Shimabuku was charged with second-degree murder, and it says here on July 10th, 1958, George Yutaka Shimabuku was indicted for the murder of Joe Emperado in the second degree. On July 11th, 1958, a plea of not guilty was entered. On August 11th, 1958, he changed the plea from guilty to guilty of manslaughter. On August 25th, 1958, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The majority of the sentence was suspended, and he was placed on probation for 5 years. Okay, the probation was given on Tuesday, September 9th, 1958 at 10:17 a.m. by Judge Albert M. Felix III. Before we get into the court documents, Shimabuku he would just barely reach his probation date, the ending of it, because in 1963 he shot and killed Billy Medeiros. He shot him 3 times in the chest. They were at a vacant lot out in an area that was close to 367 North Baratania Street. Okay, the guy that was with Billy Medeiros, his name was Harold Huber. Harold Huber saw that Shimabuku had the gun. He turned and he ran. Shimabuku fired 3 shots at him. He missed all 3 shots. And Harold Huber's testified against George Shimabuku, which caused Shimabuku to get a life term imprisonment. And it took a strange turn in that, you know, Harold Huber ended up getting arrested for robbery, and he was in prison in the same population as George Shimabuku. While in prison, he was stabbed in the chest, the abdomen, and the hand. He survived that attack, and the police asked him who it was that did it. He refused to say who it was that did it. You know, and I'm going to leave that up to you guys who you think, or you don't know, you come to your own conclusion. Later on in 1969, Shimabuku would kill Ben Ipa, and you guys are going to get more into detail of that on how he killed him. It was bizarre, you know, because how I don't know how it happened, but you guys are going to get into that, and other things about this dark, dirty, evil soul who turned out to be a serial killer, you know. And Professor Godin had told me that not that any punk could take out Joe. The level of his martial arts was you know, something that was, you know, unlike before, like anybody, you know, previous to that, or probably still now. But he was able to disarm an armed attacker. We're going to get into that later. We'll talk about that later. But the difference with Shimabuku is he was deceiving. He had it in his pocket. He had it hidden. He didn't want anybody to know that he had it. And excuse me, I asked Professor Godin if he ever saw Shimabuku while he was in prison, and he said no. They already shipped him off to a mainland prison, and he said that if he was in population with him, one of the two things would have happened: either he would have been dead, or Shimabuku would have been dead, because that's the kind of guy that Shimabuku was. Just a very dark, fucking guy that the world is a lot better place without someone like that. But that's about what I have to say about that. And before, you know, I'd like you guys to go over the court documents just briefly, or as much as you want, as you will, and discuss it. And then later, you guys will take it to where show your students or the viewers, you know, if you want to use this as a, you know, historical documents for your students, so they can know about this, or the viewers that you have who care about it. But yeah, and to clear things up, you know, the purpose why I'm doing this, okay, first of all, just to go back, Professor Gleason, the purpose that he was going to write his book, it originally was supposed to be called Kajukenbo, My Roots, The Untold Story of Walter Godin. He wanted to write about that because he wanted to tell his experiences, training experiences, and life experiences with Joe. You know, Joe meant a lot to him. He was an incredible martial arts, and he always wanted to be like, you know, what Joe had. And, you know, it was, like I said, it was a different level. And Joe was very charismatic, and he had different ideas of Kajukenbo. He said if Joe was alive today, you know, Joe would be running the Kajukenbo, you know. And, you know, Joe was a Kajukenbo shooting star. You know, he was lent to us from God for just a moment in time. And those people who trained with him during that time, you know, they were very fortunate to have trained with a guy like that, you know, of that caliber and that kind of charisma, and just, you know, really work. And, you know, before we get into that, you know, I want to talk about something. But right now, you know, you can show the documents, and you can discuss it, you know, with your viewers and with your students.
So
There
first
he
off,
is.
give a salute to great Grandmaster Joe.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about his life, or
Well, we'll talk about it after you show the documents of what, you know, because we just finished speaking of you know, the statements and everything, and the what had happened. If you want to show the documents, just show them just a little.
Let's get to this real quick. I think this is really, and I don't even know how I stumbled across it on the internet, but this article, this little clipping goes way back to when Joe was a youth, and I'm not able to read it, but Sifu Charlesworth, if you could maybe read that article, please, because it
Sure.
really is a testament to the character of Joseph Emperado, and I really think it paves the way to what transpired.
So the caption obviously says, boy detectives catch robber and spurn bribe. The schoolboy detectives caught a robber and turned down his bribe offer and held him for police Monday evening. At 6 p.m., James Shelton, 15, 1042 Morris Lane, was walking with his cousin, Herbert Dos Santos, 8, near the Capalma Canal at School Street. He saw in a vacant lot one man hit and knocked down another. Pocket the latter's wallet and walk off. James called the 7 boys playing nearby. The whole group chased and caught the robber. He denied guilt. They took him to his victim, Raymond Reinhardt, Navy Yard employee, and Reinhardt accused him of stealing $48. The robber offered the boys $50 to let him escape. They took it, gave 48 to Reinhardt, returned $2 to the robber, and held him until police officer Francis Rawlings and James Pocapaya arrived. Later, Reinhardt said he had met the robber at a bar and left with him to get a bottle and had been beaten and robbed, according to Detective David Gomberg. Age 13 to 14, or age 13 to 17, the boys helping James Shelton gave their names as Daniel Lopez, Manuel Torres, and Joseph Emperado.
Yes.
Henry Higgs, George Hernberger, and Raymond Duarte, and Dennis Alba. I wish there were more boys like them, Detective Captain Eugene Kennedy said today. So that kind of speaks to, at a young age, what kind of guy Joe Emperado was. So that's kind of cool.
That is very cool. That is very that is living Kajukenbo or Kenpo. That's doing the right things.
Yep.
Yeah.
So moving
Yeah,
along.
and just too.
So you already spoke to most of this here, but these are just some of the receipts here when it comes down to talking about what happened. These are the court documents. This right here is the indictment for the murder in the second degree, indicting George Shinabuku. The next document we have here is the minimus, which is basically just the allegation, that George Shimabuku, Honolulu City, County of Honolulu, Territory of Hawaii, on the 30th day of May, 1958, at or near 367 North Doratania Street,
Baratania.
did feloniously, willfully, and without authority, justification, or extenuation by law, kill and murder one Joseph Emperado, then and there being a human being, and did then and there and thereby commit the crime of murder in the second degree, contrary to the provisions of Hawaiian law. His bail was set at $2,500, which I guess in today's money would be what, like 25,000?
I don't know.
Still, oh yeah.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
not more.
Yeah.
But obviously being that long ago, that's quite a bit of money. Okay, this is a subpoena. This was a subpoena to the witnesses. This is Rose Sabat, a waitress at the Pink Elephant Bar, who I believe is also Joe's common law wife, correct?
Yeah, they have the same address.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then this one is for Dr. Edmund Lee, which I believe is the coroner. Is that correct?
No, he was the physician who pronounced Joe dead.
Okay. And then this is the subpoena for Dr. Alvin Majoska.
Yeah, he was the coroner.
Okay. Then we have the commitment for trial by jury for George Shimabuku for murder in the second degree. Okay. Then this is the okay, pull this open here. This is actually I believe the bail document, it says $2,500.
Mm-hmm. It's like bail receipts or
Yeah.
something.
Here's the indictment. The grand jury of the First Judicial Court in Territory of Hawaii indicting George Shimabuku. And it basically explains the circumstances with and that said date, time, place that George Shimabuku, with malice and forethought and without authority, justification, and extenuations by law, did strike, stab, cut, and wound said Joseph Emperado with a pocket knife. And by said striking, stabbing, cutting, and wounding with that said pocket knife, did then and there, and thereby give to the said Joseph Emperado certain mortal wounds and injuries, of which said Joseph Emperado did die on the 30th of May in the city of Honolulu. Okay. And that's just a continuation.
Yeah.
And it says murder in the second degree. And I think probably one of the big reasons why they went with that is probably because of the fact that he actually had the knife open in his pocket, ready to stab the first guy that hit him, as you stated previously, I believe. Then this is the arraignment and plea, where he, I believe, let's see. He changed his plea. I know originally he had pleaded to the murder charge, but then they came back and changed the charge from murder in the second degree to manslaughter, and he pled no contest. And I believe they did that because they said, well, these guys were martial artists, so instead of being murder in the second degree, they dumbed it down to manslaughter. Which is kind of shameful in my opinion, but that's what happened.
Yeah.
And here's a Honolulu Advertiser article. It says a 5-year probationary term was given to George Shimabuku, 22, a stonemason, who pled guilty to the charges of manslaughter. He was originally indicted by the grand jury for second-degree murder. He stabbed and killed Joseph Emperado, 28, of Auld Lane, last May in a sidewalk brawl in downtown Honolulu. Both had been drinking in the Pink Elephant Bar. So there's some of the information there after that happened. And then here's an order of probation, okay, this is probably one of the most ridiculous parts of this whole situation, in my opinion, is they actually put him on probation instead of sending him to jail and basically giving him time served for what happened. So July of 58, he was indicted for murder. He was arraigned. August, they changed the plea because they changed the charge to manslaughter. And then he was in 825 sentenced to 10 years in Oahu prison, which was suspended, and he was placed on probation for 5 years with special conditions of probation. All right, and then I think this just kind of explains the this is the lawyer's comments to the court. And then this is the report to the county clerk. This is the order of probation, I believe, which just spells out all the things he must do while he's on probation. But as you can see, I mean, there's been a lot of work done here to actually, prove things out here and to correct the narrative from some of those that have gone around from the talk story thing, or things are just passed by word of mouth. But we got some receipts here to show some of the things that happened here. And then I would mention too, all of the commentary that Professor Tavares was sharing with you earlier were from police reports, not just notes that he'd taken from talking to people or whatnot, but they were pulled directly out of police reports as are outlined in his book, The Black Robe.
I would go so far as to say that Professor David Tavares is the authority on the subject, and the book Black Robe should be on every Kajukenbo and Kenpo practitioner's shelf in their reading library. It is indispensable if you practice Kajukenbo and you love Kajukenbo and you really want to know the true history. I don't want to discount or discredit Joe Adriano Emperado in any way, shape, or form. I have a tremendous amount of love and respect for that gentleman, and I even got the opportunity to meet him once, thanks to Grandmaster Bob Suttles. But I just don't see how anyone in Kajukenbo cannot give Joseph Directo Emperado the same amount of credit as his brother. I just cannot. And I'm sorry, but we've done a fair amount of research that kind of led to the meeting of Professor Tavares, where we kind of accidentally stumbled into this, and then we did some digging, and I reached out to Professor Tavares and I said, hey, do you think that it's possible that Joe's death was not an accident? And then everything kind of unraveled from there, and here we are now, because I'm really passionate about this. Professor Tavares is passionate about this, and you are too, Sifu Charlesworth. And I just don't know how certain things can be overlooked, and it just, I don't even know what to say. But we're going to get to read a little bit more about this Shimabuku guy here in a bit, and that's a whole nother can of worms.
Well, before we do that, I would like to say, I want everyone to be an authority on Joe's death, and I'm going to make a statement about that later, so they could use this as their reference, is your podcast here. But I want to show, Professor Godin, I talk about the level of Joe, his skills. Joe was capable of disarming an armed assailant, okay? And he did that back in 1950, December, right here is that article right there. It was Club La Paloma, and it was December 11th, 1950. He was 20 years old at that time, I believe. And, if Dave wants to go ahead and, Mr. Charlesworth, if you can go ahead and read that to show that he was able to do that. But the problem with Shimabuku is he had it hidden, and it was pulled already. And if you can, Mr. Charlesworth, tell us about young Joe's. Yeah.
An article from the newspaper, a little clipping. It says, Bertinola Street at 9 Saturday night, allegedly attempting to draw a knife. Castanda was knocked to the floor by Joseph Emperado, 21, according to the police. The injured man was taken to the Queens for hospitalization. Charges in both incidents are pending further investigation. And then again, another article here from December 11, 1950, where it says William Crawford, investigating the case, said that witnesses told him that Joseph Emperado, 21, knocked Castapada to the floor with his fist when he thought the latter was in the act of pulling a knife on him. And he was again taken to Queens Hospital. Castanda was reported to be improving. Both cases are pending further investigation. And then another clipping. It says James Castanda, 27, cousin of Romalsal Alsaster, who is a public relations officer for the Philippine Consul General Manuel Alrate, was injured at the La Paloma Club at 82 Bertolina Street Saturday around 9 p.m. after he allegedly was in the act of pulling a knife on a man, which was Joe Emperado.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that address there. It's pretty, it's kind of near the Pink Elephant area. It's strange. Yeah.
Rough part of town.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, and that's the area where Joe worked at, and that's where he lived. And Before you get, I'm sorry to keep putting it off, but on the Shimabuku's dark side, but the thing of it is like I want everyone to be, like I said, an authority, not just on Joe, but a lot of stuff in the style that they're training in, and the day that, from what I understand, Chimabuku died December 4th, I think it was, in 2020, but it wasn't announced until uh, December 30th, 2020, and it came on social media, and then it went on to one of the Facebook pages of one of the Kajukenbo practitioners. There was a lot of comments made on there, and one of the comments that was made was from Gary Forbeck, and from what I understand, Gary Forbeck is a very respected and high-ranking person in the Kajukenbo system. I think he sits on the board of advisors, but he had made a statement that he already knew the whole story about Joe's death, and that because Sergio Adriano told him everything, including the aftermath. Now, I'm not here to dispute or refute what he had said. He made a statement, and I'm going to make a statement. Because Gary holds that high position and is very respected in the Kajukenbo community, he would have did a very great service for my instructor and my instructor's family, and also for the for the Emperado family, and I'll get into that, and also for Kajukenbo as a whole. Because once I read, I used to every once in a while go and read Kajukenbo Cafe. It's no longer on there, and there was a subject, a guy named Andrew Evans. He was a Kenpo practitioner out in Kansas. He said a tribute to Professor Godin, and one of the comments that was made back to him was, "Sorry, buddy, your professor was a coward. He ran and left Joe to die." Now, Mr. Greg Hopper, from what I understand, was the bodyguard to Sergio Adriano, and this is during Sergio Adriano while he was still alive, because of what Greg Harper's response was. He really shook up that kid. He told that kid, Sergio saw your remark and he said to knock it off. And I guess he got that kid really got scared. He was shook up. He apologized and said, that's it, and that's all that was said about that. The guy called him a coward, and they told him to just knock it off and be quiet. Now, there was another Kajukenbo practitioner who's very respected in the Kajukenbo community. I'm not going to say anything who his name was or anything. He's a really good guy, and he had, I don't know what year it was, but he had told me through email that he had the detail of driving Miss Dici and Sergio Adriano around while they were in town for a seminar or event, whatever it was, but he had that detail of driving them. And he heard a lot of their conversations. One of the conversations that was brought up was the death of Joe. And Dici and Sergio Adriano showed a strong disdain and dislike for my professor, because they felt he was the one that caused the death of Joe. Okay, now, what year that was, he said that, but for Sergio to feel that, and Miss Dici to feel that, it shows me that they did not know, what truly happened. And you fast forward to 2018 when the book came out. I was able to meet the Emperado grandchildren, Michael, who's the son of Alvin, and Gwen. I'm not sure who Gwen's father was, but anyways, they were sitting and they were talking to me, and Michael said, David, we never knew what happened to our uncle until now. We read this, and every time we brought it up, we were shut down. I said, well, from what I heard, every time the subject of Joe's death came up, Kajukenbo guys are shut down also. And Gwen asked me, why do you think that was? And I said, sweetheart, I think it's because they didn't know, and it was a accumulation of years, and all the things that I was told about Joe, and the things that I read about him, and just the man who he was, and I'd visit his grave a lot. I used to live nearby where he was buried. I was where he is buried, excuse me. And it was a little, I didn't have any money back then, but I was going to visit him. And so it got kind of emotional for me. It was an intense interview. Like, it got kind of emotional. They understood, but I'm not ashamed of it. These things, what Joe meant to me now, and what my professor, and so with that, I'm trying to say once again, it would have been a really good thing if somebody put on the thread of what happened. They didn't have to go through the details that we went through today. All they would have just had to have said was, no, Godin didn't run away. He stayed and he fought and helped his instructor. And later on, Joe couldn't breathe. He didn't feel good. He went to the hospital and he passed away. Now, what I want people to understand is that Joe, his heart stopped at 9:55 a.m. and Dr. Edmund Lee tried to resuscitate him for a half hour. It wasn't just that he just died and that was it. He tried to resuscitate him, and to no avail, it said, and he pronounced him dead at 10:35. But it would have been a really good thing if he would have put out there in the KAJUKENBO blog or thread or website or anything about, my instructor. It would have been a good thing for his family. It would have been a good thing for KAJUKENBO, and it would have been just a good thing for the Emperado family, the Gwen and Mike, because they didn't know what happened until 2018. They didn't know about it. What year, Sergio Adriano, had told Mr. Forback, Gary Forback, what really happened. I don't know, but now that they have this, people, hopefully all the KAJUKENBO guys can, come here and they can see and hear and look and see what truly happened. So that way they all can know and be an authority on it and teach their students, what happened and how great, not just about Joe's death, but the instructor he was, the man who he was, and what he did for KAJUKENBO. It was just a short time in life, but maybe God needed him as a spiritual warrior, for today's battle is spiritual warfare. Yeah, if you could talk about that
Yeah.
the pallbearers.
Well,
Yeah.
obviously, I mean, when you look at, after this happened.
Can I interject with one thing that came to mind while you were talking, Professor? And I really think it's noteworthy. As we mentioned before, these are documents, receipts, they're legal documents, they're court documents. These are the evidence. I'm not trying to discount or discredit anyone. We have to keep in mind that all these people are people that we admire, we love, and respect as practitioners of KAJUKENBO and Kenpo. However, historical accuracy is very important, and I hate to say it, but I don't see Adriano Emperado. I don't see that name anywhere in any of these eyewitness accounts. And so there's a difference between eyewitness accounts, historical accuracy, and talking story and just giving your own personal account when you don't even know what happened, really, because he wasn't there. Whereas Professor Tavares has meticulously done the work to dig up the pieces of evidence to support. Really, the important thing is finding the truth. And Joseph Emperado deserves to have his true story told, just as any human being would. But it's particularly important to KAJUKENBO and Kenpo practitioners, or at least I believe it should be. And I just wanted to add that, because in all those accounts and all the information that we just covered, not once was the name Adriano Emperado listed, period. So he just wasn't there. And I don't think he should be the one telling the story if he doesn't have all the facts. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way or anything. And God rest his soul. I have a tremendous amount of love and respect for Sergio Adriano Emperado. But I would venture to say that it's fair enough to call Joseph Emperado a Sergio as well. I mean, at least a great grandmaster. Don't cheat him of the history that he deserves. He was a huge part of it. But yeah, Adriano wasn't there. It's that simple, folks. His name is not on any of those eyewitness accounts. So let's look at facts, and that's what we're doing.
All right. So
That's all I got.
this photo right here, obviously, you know, and from what I understand, it was quite a turnout at his funeral, because from what I understand, Joe Emperado was quite the leader and quite impactful on the beginning of Kajukenbo. Obviously, a lot of articles I've read and things like that, he was a focal point in what happened at the Palama settlement with the creation of Kajukenbo. And I think that gets shown. In fact, looking at this picture right here, you can see the faces on the men here that are escorting Joe to his final resting place. In fact, you know, the two guys up here in the front, the guy on the left, believe that guy's name is Frank Swan. The guy on the right is Cid Asuncion. And then the pole boners on the left-hand side, okay, are Charles Lucalu, I think, is this how you say his name? Right behind him is Great Grandmaster Walter Godin, and then behind him is Gabby Iowa. Now, on the right-hand side, can't really see the faces of the pole bearers because they're all hidden behind Cid Asuncion. But I believe we got Big Ben Kukabu, and then behind him, Henry Mandek, and then the last guy on the right, you know, can't really tell because can't really see his face or anything, and we're not really sure who that guy is. So if anybody out there can remember back that far or was there and can remember who was helping to carry Joe, you know, leave us a comment down below and let us know who that guy is. But
I think maybe Henry Mandek's son would know, because his father was one of the pallbearers. I don't know if you ever discussed it with him, but if he would, you know, help you guys out if he knows, or anybody else, yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah.
Oh, no worries.
Should we?
So, and then obviously still up
Should we
today.
talk a little bit about citizenship?
Yeah. By the way, you know, there's a book. You know, if you know, Mr. Charles, if you could put the camera on me, I want to show a book. All right, here. Okay, this book was written by Vern Blevins. Okay, it's about Cid Asuncion. Now, Cid Asuncion, he too was like kind of scrubbed from Kajukenbo history. He was the guy was about like my height and about my weight, but the guy was just an incredible martial artist, like Joe. And Joe was his instructor. He trained at Palama, you know. And for some reason, I guess there was a fallout between him and Joe, but they reconciled after. But I don't know the story on that. You'd have to talk to Mr. Vern Blevins or just read his book. I mean, this book is a really good book. I really like it. I recommend it to everyone. And you know, it's a big credit to. It talks a lot about Professor Cid Asuncion and his Kenpo system, and another guy named J.J. Yusan inside there. And yeah, if you know, take a look at that book, buy it, read it. It's a really good read. You know, it'll yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that about Professor Cid Asuncion. Yeah.
Yeah. So I believe
you had the 60th anniversary up there.
What's that?
The 60th anniversary photo. That was
Oh yeah, let me bring the screen back up here. There we go. Okay, so this should be a picture of the 60th anniversary of Joe's death, I believe.
Yes, yeah, it was. And all the way to the left there is Delilah Godin. She came down. That's Professor Godin's daughter. She separated herself from the martial arts after her father died. The only time she came back, you know, to participate in a martial arts event was when Eugene Cedeno was promoted to 10th degree through the Godine lineage from John Hackelman back in 2019, I think it was. Yeah, 2019, I think it was. And then, the guy, there's, of course, it's myself next to Delilah. And then there's Jenna Kuseki from Kenpo Unlimited. There's Brett Arizumi from Kenpo Unlimited. John Rubinal from Kenpo Unlimited. Professor Tommy Lamb, who got the 10th degree also from through the Godine lineage from Eugene Cedeno. Then the rest is from Professor George Versola and Professor Frank Rabello from the Advanced Kenpo Karate. They're from the Godine lineage also. And then there's Big Emery, and then I can't the little girl holding the umbrella. I forget the guy's name. The one who's standing behind it. But next to that is I have a hard time pronouncing his name. He's from Kuwait. He's a student of Nate Ortega. Okay, Nate Ortega is at the far left, and then his girlfriend Dawn, and then there's Michael Emperado, the son of Alvin Emperado. They all came to say, it really touched my heart that those guys came down, to pay tribute to Joe. And from what I understand, Michael ended up every year he would do that, but that's the only year that I put together, and Michael kept it going as a traditional thing in his family.
Beautiful.
Thanks for putting that picture. Anyways.
No worries.
That's great.
All right. So then that brings us to this evil face right here. Missing the little girly bangs, but
yeah, that's the face.
But this is that evil guy that basically fractured our Ohana, when it comes to losing Joe Emperado. And I know that Sifu Miller is going to talk a little bit about what happened with that guy. I think I'm going to go back to this picture while you do it, because I would rather
ladies,
I'd rather take the focus off of him and put the focus back on this guy.
Absolutely.
So go ahead and share with us what you got there, Sifu Miller.
Well, gentlemen, is the face of evil. And I'll be reading from an article in the Honolulu Civil Bulletin. It is dated December 31st, 2020. And we could probably even make a link available in the description of the video later. Sifu Charlesworth, in case people are interested in reading this for themselves. But this should paint a pretty clear picture of the type of dark individual that Mr. Shimabuku was. And I really don't take it lightly I don't think anyone should take lightly. It's a really serious thing when you can say the words that the world is a better place without somebody. But folks, I must concur. I cannot disagree with that statement, because I'm about to tell you why. And unfortunately, Joseph Emperado was one of many people that this man, Shimabuku, terrorized, and he was just out to destroy and kill. He was a child of Satan, I'm convinced. George Yutaka Shimabuku, who served more time than any other inmate in the Hawaii prison system, has finally completed his long sentence. Convicted of a homicide before statehood, Shimabuku died this month, and that was December 31st, 2020, at age 84, after being transferred to an Arizona hospital from the Saguaro Correctional Center, if I got that right, hopefully. Shimabuku was originally convicted of manslaughter for a 1958 stabbing outside the former Pink Elephant Bar on North Beretania Street. In the years that followed, was twice found guilty of first-degree murder in 2 separate shootings. And honestly, folks, we pretty much just proved it beyond the shadow of a doubt. I mean, the documents show that it was reduced to manslaughter, but folks, murder is murder. And I don't think that the court was right in acknowledging martial arts skills that Joe Emperado and Walter Godin possessed, and whoever else, that was some sort of justification for reducing the charge to manslaughter. I just think that's absolutely ridiculous. And that's my opinion, but you've got the facts now. They're right there in the video. So people can make up their own mind. We're just presenting facts and information. Anyway, he was sentenced to 2 life terms without possibility of parole in those cases, and was imprisoned continuously in state or federal correction facilities for more than 56 years, from 1964 until he died on December 4th. Folks, that's a lifetime career of destruction and terrorizing people. Shimabuku was no criminal mastermind, but he was a violent survivor in an era when Hawaii's prison system was so wildly dysfunctional that inmates had access to guns. One of Shimabuku's murder convictions was for shooting a fellow convict to death, a fatal shooting, in the hobby shop of the former Hawaii State Prison. If you can believe that one, ladies and gentlemen, it's true. The Honolulu Star Bulletin observed that a witness who testified against Shimabuku in 1964 was stabbed repeatedly at Hawaii State Prison, HSP, less than 2 months later. And Shimabuku was part of a crew of inmates armed with knives who tried to escape from the old Halawa jail the same year. The escape attempt failed. Now, are we getting a picture of who this guy is, folks? Hawaii authorities considered Shimabuku to be a maximum security inmate and a diagnosed sociopath. I would say dude was psycho, but I'm not a clinical dude. I'm not a doctor. Anyway, and they declared in 1969 that he had one of the worst conduct records in the state prison system, according to federal court records. He was transferred to Leavenworth Penitentiary later that year under an agreement between the state and federal government for handling particularly dangerous convicts, and served the next 45 years of his sentence in the federal system. Court records show that while he was in Leavenworth, he was questioned as one of 4 suspects in the fatal stabbing of a convicted bank robber whose body was dumped in a tank in the vegetable preparation area of the prison kitchen in 1972. He was later transferred to the maximum security United States Penitentiary, built as a replacement for the Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. Need I say more? Described in newspaper accounts as a stonemason or a farmhand, Shimabuku was born February 12, 1936, and drafted into the U.S. Army in 1956. He trained with the 25th Infantry Division. I don't even want to go into this because even though he has all this stuff that he did, it is notable, though. He represented the Division Armor Unit in a Schofield Barracks boxing tournament in 57. He fought at 119 pounds, losing in a 3rd-round knockout. So obviously the man knew how to fight. He practiced using knives. I mean, this man violence was more than a hobby for this individual. His known criminal career began on May 30th, 1958, after a session of drinking at the Pink Elephant in the A'ala area. I hope I pronounced that right, Professor. A'ala? Yeah. And then the photo that we looked at was Mr. Shimabuku, seen in 2014. It was probably one of the last ones, I think, maybe before, I don't know, his streak of violence was ended. But by one account, 22-year-old Shimabuku was part of a group of 3 men who began fighting in the early morning hours, with a 4th man on the sidewalk outside the bar. Witnesses testified that Joseph Emperado, a mechanic who was described as a Kenpo karate expert, intervened to break up the melee, much like he did as a teenager I wouldn't doubt it if Joe was the guy that pinned that dude when he was a teenager with those boys until the cops could show up and arrest him. Emperado was stabbed in the back, chest, and arms, but apparently did not realize how badly he was injured. And as we've covered, and we have all the documentation anyone needs, there's a little bit more to it other than that brief summary of the stabbing. And it's horrific, folks, in my opinion. But he drove himself back. I don't think any of this is even accurate. I don't even want to talk about that part because this is not accurate right there. But according to the Honolulu Advertiser, Shimabuku admitted to police he stabbed typo Emperado, it's Emperado, with a 6-inch pocket knife. And a territorial grand jury charged him with second-degree murder. He was convicted of manslaughter in 1958, sentenced to 5 years probation and a 10-year suspended prison term. Shimabuku, also known as Shima, was released less than 3 years after that conviction. About 5 years after the Emperado stabbing, Shimabuku was arrested and charged with another killing that played out in Aala, less than 2 blocks from the Pink Elephant. According to the Advertiser, Shimabuku had a disagreement with a barroom bouncer named William R. Medeiros. After Medeiros slapped a 15-year-old girl during an exchange on the street, and police said Medeiros had previously dated the girl, and she later testified she'd lived with Medeiros for a time. But Shimabuku intervened, told Medeiros, age 23, that he should not slap girls. There was a quarrel. The cops broke it up, but the two agreed to meet later and duke it out, fight in a vacant lot on Hall Street, which, remember, that was brought up before. Take note of that name, Hall Street. Spectators gathered there to watch on November 23rd, 1963. And Medeiros asked a friend named Harold Huber to accompany him to the fight, and Huber realized Shimabuku was armed. Huber testified, I saw the guy had a gun. I told Medeiros, but Medeiros told me, if you want to bug out now, bug out now. I told Medeiros I would stay for the bruises. As Medeiros and Shimabuku squared off 3 feet apart from each other, Shimabuku produced a pistol and fired 3 shots. 2 bullets struck Medeiros in the chest, and Shimabuku then turned the gun on Huber, who fled. Shimabuku fired 3 times at Huber, but missed, according to trial testimony. Police later recovered a .38 caliber Colt revolver used in a shooting where it had been dumped behind a local bakery. Arrested Shimabuku on Britannia Street as he waited to catch a taxi. Shimabuku's lawyer argued at trial the shooting was self-defense because Shimabuku believed he was in quote-unquote great danger from Medeiros. But the jury convicted Shimabuku of first-degree murder, thank God. He was 27 years old when the court imposed the mandatory sentence of life in prison without possibility of parole. In a vicious footnote to that case, Huber was stabbed in the chest, abdomen, and hand in the maximum security section of Hawaii State Prison 2 months after Shimabuku's trial. Huber had a robbery conviction and had been returned to the prison for parole violation. Huber survived but refused to say who attacked him. Shimabuku was being held as part of the general population in another part of the prison at that time, according to prison officials. In the article is a picture of the prison yard with much barbed wire coiled around it, and the caption says Shimabuku was serving a life sentence at Saguaro Correctional Center in Eloy, Arizona before he died. Hawaii holds 1,000 prisoners at the private prison because there's no room for them in Hawaii correctional facilities. Shimabuku earned a second life sentence in the second floor hobby shop of the state prison for the murder of Benjamin, 28, a former amateur boxer from Maui. I had convictions for theft, burglary, and assault, but lost an arm in a woodworking accident at Kulani Honor Camp a year before. An inmate witness testified at the trial that he saw Shimabuku struggling with Ipa over a pistol in the hobby shop on August 19th, 1967. and watched as inmates Fraticelli, Robert Fraticelli, wonder if he's related to Glenn, and Melvin Titcomb, that's a nice name, Mr. Titcomb, joined in the scuffle. Shimabuku shot Ipa once, and the inmate witness said he advanced on Shimabuku with a 2-foot length of pipe. Shimabuku brandished a .38 caliber revolver and told the witness it was not his beef, quote unquote, and ordered him out of the shop. The inmate witness, who was identified by the advertiser as George Pye, testified that as he was leaving, he heard 2 more shots fired, and Ipa died, and another prisoner named James Marquez was shot in the stomach but survived. The prison superintendent said he believed the killing stemmed from, quote unquote, an old fight. In the middle of the trial for these shootings in '68, Shimabuku agreed to plead guilty to first-degree murder in the Ipa case, and Fraticelli and Titcomb pled guilty to manslaughter, and Shimabuku received another mandatory life term without possibility of parole, praise the Lord, while Fraticelli and Mr. Titcomb were each sentenced to 10 years. Shortly before Shimabuku's sentencing, State Corrections Division Administrator Ray Belknap was asked by the advertiser what was to be done with an inmate such as Shimabuku who had nothing to lose. Hawaii had abolished the death penalty before statehood, and Belknap warned the Hawaii prison system can, quote unquote, cannot handle the long basis, the extremely rebellious and recalcitrant man such as this. Shimabuku was transferred to the federal prison system in April 1969, remained there for decades until he was finally returned to the Hawaii system in June 2014. According to a spokeswoman for the Hawaii Department of Public Safety, by then, he had been mostly forgotten. While Shimabuku's cases were covered in the newspapers in the decade after statehood, other inmates who served many years in the Hawaii system said they had never heard of him or met him. His reputation was erased by his decades in federal prisons. Hawaii holds nearly 1,000 inmates in the privately run Arizona prison, which we covered, and Shimabuku was serving time there until October 25th, when he was admitted to an Arizona hospital. He died at the hospital in Maricopa County on December 4th, one of 7 Hawaii inmates who died this year while serving prison terms at Saguaro. And thus ends the path of destruction that followed this dark soul. That's the evil individual that stole Joseph Emperado from the world and from all of us in Kajukenbo and Kenpo. And now everyone has the information. Anyone who tunes into this podcast has all the information. It's right there. Professor?
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity. If you don't want to buy the book, that's fine. The book is an old book, but if any of your viewers, or if you don't get viewers, at least for your students, they'll have a reference point in this subject, so that they'll know, what had happened if they're interested. And you didn't put any dog leash collars on me. I was allowed to say what I thought should be out there. And like I said, I'm not here to dispute or refute what anybody said. It's just, this is what happened. And, there's still people that they're going to, as Professor Godin said, they're going to interpret the truth in their own way. He said, when they see me, they already formed an opinion about me. And I say these things because, Kalani Koa, I'm sure you guys know her. She's a 9th degree Kajukenbo. She's from Mr. Kamahoho's lineage, but I knew her when she was a kid. Her name is Harriet Koa. I knew her as, and the brother Henry, I knew him. Rest his soul. Well, anyway, she's friends with Joe Emperado, and Kalani told me that she talked to Jody about the book. She didn't want to read it because she just didn't want to read it. But she came over to Kalani's house one day. Kalani had read the Young Joe chapter to her, and she still does not believe what was written in the book. She still goes by what her mother. Well, this is what I'm told, is that what her mother told her, that Joe, was off that day. They called him in because they knew that there was going to be a fight, so they wanted him to go over there and break it up. He went there and lost his life, and for that reason, Jody's mother never did like Kajukenbo. She really was disgusted with it, and she didn't like Kajukenbo, and you know, which tells me, you know, people are, you know, the misinformation out there, or the things that were rumored and everything like that. You know, this hopefully this clears it up. I'm just, like I said, I just wanted my instructor's name. I wanted him to be exonerated. You know, and you know, my professor was a good guy, and hopefully you guys will give me a part two and talking about my professor's life, his martial arts life with Joe, and his separation or being kicked out of Kajukenbo, and how that all happened, and how Kajukenbo was created, and how we went back to Kenpo karate, then to Chinese Kenpo, and his connection with Chow, how we, you know, just a lot of things, you know, and you don't give me you give me the liberty and the freedom to speak about that without hurting, you know, people wouldn't let me say things, you know, because they didn't want things to be covered, you know. But anyways, I thank you guys. You know, you know, I wish you guys all the luck. You know, for the rest of the year, and yeah, hopefully I get to in the part two talk about Godin.
Well, we would be absolutely honored and privileged to host you for a follow-up episode to clear the air regarding Great Grandmaster Walter Godin. That would be our privilege. It would be a joy. We've really enjoyed this time and all the time that we spent together leading up to this while we were researching everything. And it should probably be noted that there will be some follow-up episodes with Sifu Charlesworth and I, where Professor Tavares won't be present, but we're going to go into some other stuff that's more speculative that we've kind of has crossed our mind when we connected dots. But today's episode, the Joe Emperado Experience, is strictly facts, ladies and gentlemen, with the receipts, because Professor Tavares has done all of the homework and the detective work. And there's other folks out there that I don't want to discount and discredit that have done a decent amount of work, but they missed certain things, folks. And we're not here to say someone's right or wrong, but accuracy is very important. And accuracy is right. That's what we need. And Joe Emperado deserves to have his history told accurately all throughout Kajukenbo and Kenpo. Period. I can't say that enough. Gentlemen,